Oh, sorry. That there.
By the magic word.
Yeah.
Yeah. Coming of age, and soon our world will be reshaped in their image. Our economy, our politics, and our culture, and even the shape of our family life will be forever transformed, because these children are born with an innate knowledge of how to use every type of digital technology that ever exists. And every time I see this quote being trotted out by policymakers and public figures, I want to go. I have feelings about this. Okay? Born digital is a myth, and we'll talk about this before. There's a design match that says the only intuitive interface is the nipple. After that, everything's lunch. And even then, sometimes babies aren't sure. What we see as intuitive use of digital technology, intuitive being in giant inverted commas, is a practice around technology and tools which is informed by a number of different complex issues. Firstly, a lot of the digital tools and technologies that we use are built or partially built by designers. And interface design is a massive part of what we see as being digitally native. I'm assuming you guys all use things like word processing tools. Yeah? And so you've got the save button and the file button and so forth. And when you go into your internet browser, it's kind of the same structure, isn't it? And when you go into, say, movie editing tools, it's kind of the same structure. And when you go into conference tools, it's kind of the same structure. It's easier to teach a human being than it is to teach a tool. And so we often find that what we see as being an intuitive use is actually just prior experience of a tool being used by those people to navigate themselves through an unfamiliar environment. So when we're talking about the digital native and youth being somehow better at technology, that they can program the VCR or the Skybox, that they understand how to fix your email, all that stuff, what we're actually seeing is not that they are born knowing with something. Rather, they've learned through experience and exposure, and they haven't got previous patterns and paradigms to unlearn. So the idea of the digital native is a bit of a myth. And when we talk to students, we find that they're actually in a toxic environment around this mythology of the digital native. They have been told from when they were very young that you're the digital natives. You should intuitively understand this material. And in their heads they're going, oh crap, I don't. Oh no, I'm just going to hide now. Yeah. And so we find that students are actually very resistant to new experiences for a large part of their exploration of digital environments, just in case they make a mistake. And they pop the illusion that they are somehow maestros of technology. And so what we find is that students stay within a very safe pool. They're on a little safe group of sites. So these are the sites that come up again and again and again. When we ask young people, 16 to 18-year-olds, what do they do online? They hang out in their social media sites. They go to Wikipedia. But they don't edit Wikipedia. They read it, but a lot of them actually don't even understand that you can edit Wikipedia until I go into the site that they need to do their essay and say, and by the way, do not quote this in your MIFCO essays. And they get really scared. Trade Me is really popular. Air New Zealand, I think because this is my Dunedin cohort and they have to travel quite a lot. News sites, Google and Gmail, and their banking sites. That probably accounts for 90% of their online activity, maybe 99. We are looking at a very small group of sites taking up the majority of their online time. And if they are getting new information, new ideas, it's often being filtered through their social media by that small proportion of users who are a bit more confident, who go out and explore a bit further. And then they bring back to the large mass a link. Oh, you guys should check this out, this is really cool. And then people click on that en masse and they go, oh, I've got this new idea, and then they tell their parents, and their parents go, wow, you're digital natives, you're yeah. So it's a lie, it's a myth. I'm sorry, it is. Okay. Myth number 2. Youth post everything and privacy is dead. This myth is a little bit more complicated. Zuckerberg, who, as you might know, is the founder of Facebook, posted a couple of years ago that young people don't care as much about privacy. People want to post everything, and the age of privacy is over. My favorite quotes. It's probably nothing to do with the fact that Mark Zuckerberg made his fortune by selling the private data of individuals. No, I really don't see the connection. Privacy is dead. This is a little complicated. This is actually from a Pew Internet and American Life survey, and I know it's dangerous to show a pie graph to statisticians. This is not my pie graph. So this was released on Wednesday, so this is quite a recent survey that they did. Now this is the front end privacy. This is what teenagers are self-reporting, and I'm going to come back because that's important. They are self-reporting that 60% of them have their settings to private, 25% to partially, 14% to public, and 1% don't know how to fix their privacy settings. I have a feeling there's a little bit of reporting bias in these stats just off the top, because again, I've been told I'm a digital native and I should know how to manage my own privacy settings in my favorite website. So we might see a little bit of a perception bias here. We might also see people who think that they know what they're doing, but in fact they're just clicking a few buttons and hoping. We see that quite a lot. And so, on the surface, we think, okay, is privacy dead? 60% at least think that their settings are private, and if we look at the qualitative data, we see responses like, I feel like I kind of have a filter to my brain. I just know it's not a good idea to post revealing information. I'm not going to let somebody know something that I don't want them to know. I have to admit, I read that and laughed. Hang on a second. I'm not going to tell something to somebody that I don't trust. And so the idea of having an in-group and an out-group complicates this idea of, is there privacy in the digital age? And I'm thinking, as I'm looking at these statistics, that perhaps part of the mythology that youth don't care about privacy comes from graphs like this. And on the first glance, you might think, okay, the black is 2012, the blue is 2006, and in every category, disclosure has gone up. In cases of things like cell phone numbers, it's gone up dramatically. And you look at that, particularly if you're not a statistician, and you go, oh, they're telling everything. Oh, no privacy. This is interesting because this is about Facebook. And Facebook creates a very specific set of conditions that contextualize this information. On Facebook, can you use a pseudonym? Does anybody know?
Well, you have to be pretty clever about it.
Yes, thank you. You have to be very clever about it and trick the system into believing that Zaffrod Beeblebrox is your real name. Tried, I couldn't fool it. Often you have to associate with a location, such as a school. They ask you, if you don't put this information again, they pester you for it. You haven't put a school in, update your information. Such and such is in a school. Do you know them through your school connections? Pester, 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 pester. If there's parents in the room, you know how good pester power is. Pester, pester, pester. You need a valid email address to sign up. Often, city or town is given with school location. The new layout of Facebook, again, pesters you if you don't upload a photograph of yourself for your profile. And that profile photo cannot be private. Even if the rest of your settings are private, your photo and your name are in the public directory no matter what you do. Cell phone is the interesting one. And often people say, yeah, I get all this contextual information, and kids are kind of feel like they're forced to put it out there to get the full experience of Facebook. But why are they putting their cell phone numbers? And I'm thinking, talking to the students that I work with, the 16 to 18-year-olds, a cell phone is now like a name. It's just part of the information you give out in general, everyday social contacts. It's no longer a private connection to self. It's just another identifier. Hi, I'm Erika, I'm from Otago, and my cell phone number is, I'm not going to say it because it's recorded. I think about privacy. And it's quite common. And I've watched students working together, and they might never connect again. But if you look at their cell phone address books, hundreds upon hundreds of numbers. And sometimes they won't even be able to tell you who that person is anymore. And they have to purge their numbers when they buy a new cell phone. So we're seeing cell phones becoming less privileged as private information. So the statistics here, I hate to say it, are a little misleading. Dangerous. So what we're seeing here as we think of lack of privacy or privacy is dead is actually a kind of performance management that is being shaped by the tools of engagement that their network is on. That's important. So when we look at the qualitative information of, this is from the Pew survey by the way, of what is happening on these sites where privacy is dead, we see these kinds of responses. They're all people I know. I change my privacy settings when I add new friends because I want to see what they see and don't see. My friends on Facebook are about 90% of the people I know. So we see in these sort of quotes that Facebook is an extension of their physical social networks. Previous experiences of social networking online were very much about dispersed geographical networks. These were people like me. MySpace is a great example. MySpace was connecting to people like me, particularly people who liked bands like I do. Whereas Facebook is about geolocal information. And we find that on Facebook, the majority of the friend connections that have been made are in a very constrained geolocal location, unless there's some mitigating factor like the person travels a lot, in which case we see it spread out. But if you've got teenage children and you talk to them and you say, who is your Facebook friend circle, I would suggest that most, if not all, will be Wellington-based. Yeah. What is interesting as well about this is that social networks only work if they're a network. And networks only work through disclosure. If I have a network and I want to maintain them, I have to maintain a presence. And this is really interesting for social virtual networks. If you don't post, you cease to exist. Not in some metaphysical sense, in virtual network sense. Because if you've got the Facebook timeline going or the Twitter timeline going, if you don't post for a while, you cease to exist, you drop out of memory. Particularly if you've got 300 friends on Facebook. And so you have to keep posting, you have to keep disclosing. And I know the media loves to sort of poo-poo and say, oh, Twitter's just about people taking photographs of their sandwiches and saying what they have for breakfast. But that's a really low-cost way of saying, hey, I'm still here and I'm still interested, and if you're there, we want to talk. It's called keeping the line open. What we found with Facebook shaping the privacy disclosure to such an extent is that Facebook has become a chore. And so we get quotes like this. I think I deleted my Facebook because it was just too much for me, all the gossip and all the clicks and how important it was. It was just too stressful to stay on Facebook. And my favorite one, if you can read at the bottom, it says, you've got to read this in American accent because this is from Southern America. Like, I deactivated it because it was drama, drama, drama. And so what we're seeing now, and what happened at the beginning of this year, is that Tumblr exceeded Facebook in the very coveted 15 to 29-year-old age group. People are turning off their Facebooks more and more often because the cost of disclosure now exceeds the benefits of the network. And we're seeing people move to more anonymous sites like Tumblr, where you can choose a pseudonym without being pestered for it. You can have a profile picture or not without being pestered for it. But it's interesting, and I'll come back to Tumblr because Tumblr has no privacy settings at all. But when we're looking at why people stick on these networks, even though they're being pushed for privacy disclosure more and more and more, I always come back to the Parush law. Parush's law says that participation in the newest communication technology becomes compulsory if you want to remain part of that culture. And when we talk to, say, students in residential halls who have moved to a town for the first time, and they say, why did you get Facebook? And I said, I didn't want it, but everything I needed to know was on Facebook, and so I had to get one. I'm hearing that more and more in the feedback. I had to get one. I have to go to class and I had to get a Facebook. So we're seeing that privacy disclosure, there may be more information circulating, but the question still remains whether that disclosure is voluntary. Or is that disclosure being managed or mismanaged for perception or for participation within a particular communications technology? Which brings me to myth number 3. Being digital is universal. Everybody does this. My favorite thing. Everybody is involved in new communications technologies. Which is where I want to bring up the digital divide. We hear the myth about being digital being universal, often because policymakers and media leaders tend to be from the same socio-economic class. And so they're the ones propagating and replicating the stories that everybody has a smartphone. Everybody's on Facebook. Everybody's blogging. Everybody's a digital native. Whereas what we find is that these experiences are actually centered on particular populations, and they are not representative of the entire experience of online users. So when we talk about the digital divide, we're not talking about an either-or category. We're talking about a continuum of access. And so this is a very simple graph I knocked up in that one. So we have the very high-end users, and often these are the people being reported on. There was a great Time cover about 2 weeks ago where it said, the me generation, they're always on Facebook and they're going to ruin the world. And somebody wrote back and said, the me generation, you should hire better interns. It was actually a pretty accurate comment. So on this end of the spectrum, you've got pretty good access to the internet. You've got regular connection. I mean, just as a room survey, who can get internet on their phone? Can you see where you guys are kind of fitting on my diagram? Domestic dial-up access, and we split it mainly a point of access for this particular type of divide. This is the technological divide. Then we have non-domestic access, so people who access at school, through their libraries. Cyber cafes are quite popular in Southeast Asia, for example. And then no access. Depending on who you talk to and which statistic you get, statistics again, 60 to 80% of the global population has never made a phone call. So we are talking about a very small part of the global population participating in these dialogues. And if we're being really accurate, it actually looks a bit more like this. And this is even being generous. I couldn't get the boxes any smaller. So we're seeing that the digital divide and the representation of digital performance aren't synonymous. They're not matching up. And so we have to include in our discussions about being digital and being connected and being private or public, this idea that not everybody's having access, and that access isn't just technology, it's also literacy. This is a really big diagram, I know. But this is kind of what that previous diagram was, this idea of access, infrastructure, tools, distribution. People who can access the internet on their smartphone versus people who have to ride their bike 10 miles to the library to access the internet. They're going to have completely different experiences of even tools like Facebook in terms of the news feed that's flowing by, the media flows that they're consuming. But it's not just the tools themselves, it's also how they use the tools, understand the tools, and create with the tools. And this comes back to my first myth about the digital native. And hopefully you're starting to see the connection. We look at the use of youth and media, and we see their familiarity with the environment, and we say, okay, they're using the tools so well, they must understand and be able to create with them. Whereas what we actually find is that understanding and creativity only occur for a very small subset of that population, and usually those who are very motivated to do it. And I heard a very great story, which I'm going to steal wholesale right now, about a teacher who used graphic calculators, I believe it was, and he wanted the students to explore the file structure. I hope I get the story right. And so he said, oh, by the way, there's some porn in one of the subfiles. And so, because you helped me find it, and so apparently the kids explored, and they got motivated to try and understand the technology. I mean, that's a pretty simple example. But we often see another example of this is people who create GIFs, or GIFs, depending on which side of the debate you fall on. The big debate online, is it GIF or is it GIF? It feels like a war. And so people who would not describe themselves as very artistic, very technologically savvy, suddenly have a motivation to learn to understand and create with these tools. And so they take a jump. And we find that these jumps and these leaps are very individual. And so if somebody feels sufficiently motivated, if they want it bad enough, they'll teach themselves, or they'll learn from others. And so this is the really interesting part of this disclosure pattern I mentioned previously, is that people can get together and say, I really liked how you did your Facebook banner and your photograph. Can you show me how you did that? And so we have this very uneven distribution of literacy within the digital environment. Okay, come on. So this comes back. This comes back to a conflict of discourse, is the fancy way we would describe this. We see within educational, environmental, and social environments a kind of a disconnect between lived experience and the frameworks of society. And teaching is my favorite example of this, and not just because I stand in front of students 5 days a week. It's a really good example because it highlights old ways of thinking and working in a new information environment. A sage on a stage standing in front of you like this was a fantastic way to deliver information when literacy was like 1% of the population. This was a great way to get information to a large group of people. Now we're doing the sage on the stage to a large group of people who can go read the Wikipedia article of what I'm talking about, or go watch a YouTube clip about what I'm talking about, and get the same information in a way that makes more sense to them. And so this, I think, is one of the reasons why the myth of the digital native has persisted as long as it has. It's not that they're naturally more sophisticated, it's that they have a greater choice of material that they can draw on as they feel the need to explore. And that's really important. So an example of this, and this is an example I use quite a lot, is the ways in which young people engage with Barack Obama's political campaign. Barack Obama used social media in very sophisticated ways to appeal to a youth population that normally does not engage in politics in the United States. And so what young people did, they engaged with this campaign, and then they said, well, where's the payback? Where are these promises that you gave to us in the second campaign? And so we started to see online a large number of politically motivated, highly sophisticated cultural remix products. And Lawrence Lessig argued that remix is the way that young people understand the world today, because they have the tools and the motivation to chop up their society and put it together in a way that makes sense to them. I do have to warn you that the way this is cut together, it does occasionally sound like it should be bleeped. It does have a few swear words in it, so if that's okay?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay.
Just, hang on. I'll go back.
You go back for me?
Yeah, I'll get it up.
Yes.
Yeah.
Technology.
Okay, I've done shared content on this.
Listen to a lot of Jay-Z. If you're having bank problems, I feel bad for you. Son, I got 99 problems. It's not one. I got protesters saying our economy woes. And my Wall Street brothers want Occupy close. You bitches keep saying no change, no votes. I work for the bank. Stupid. What type of threats are those? The gas pumps where your whole paycheck goes. It's been a long time since you was having cash flow, so fuck my critics. You can kiss my gas. If you don't like my lyrics, then you can hit the road. Who cares about the polls? This election's a show. If you want to vote for me, I don't give a shit, so Max trying to use my weak ass so advertisements. Give them more cash for ads. Fuckers, I don't know what you take me as, but understand the intelligence Obama has. Your problem. Riches, ranks, bitches. He's dumb. I got 99 problems. It's not one. 99 problems. It ain't one. With all your bank problems, I feel bad for you, son. I got 99 problems. Bitch, not one. The year is 2009, and the White House is fine, but the economy is in full motherfucking decline. Words of shit on the poor, or lay the banks to get elected once more. Now, I'm not trying to fight. JP Morgan Chase got their campaign dollars so I could win the race. So I sat there and watch the country implode. Person, do you know how to cheat the tax code? Well, I don't. I'm rich, and my tax rate's low. I look like a 1%er. You would know that I passed your test, or should I guess something?
No, just tell us what you sent down to Mexico.
If you think I'm stepping down from office for trafficking weapons in their drug cartel, or I ain't stepping down from shit because this president's legit.
Well, do you mind if we see that birth certificate?
All my records are blocked. You conspiracy, and I know my rights. You don't need a warrant for that.
Now, aren't you, Chuck, as a tack? Are you some type of lawyer or something?
Well, I'm not a lawyer for nothing. I passed the bar, so I know quite a bit. Enough that you don't stand a fucking chance.
Well, let's see how smart you are when the election comes.
I got 99 problems. This bitch ain't one. 99 problems. This ain't one. With all your bank problems, I feel bad for you, son. I got 99 problems. Bitch, not one. Criminal, fraud, repression, deceit, like murder, and I plunder for the world elite. We invade countries, so we have all a home. I have a dream. Well, I have a drone. Like this remix.
So that was obviously made by somebody who had a bit of sophistication in their digital tools. However, it's interesting, that was just the first video that artist ever made. And he wanted to make it in response because he just felt so badly, so he took Jay-Z's music and he mashed it up with those lyrics, with those clips. And he developed those skills to make that video and mashed up, because of course Barack Obama didn't actually swear, he cut the syllables together to get the depth of his feeling across, shall we say. So we can see sophistication of tools, of access, of privacy, graduations, when a perceived need is seen. So that was my 3 myths. let's go on to our issues. This kind of digital culture, this kind of framing of how people connect, engage, socialize, raises a number of really interesting issues. And I'm going to start with copyright, because that video, of course, is a giant copyright infringement just waiting to happen. Copyright is a really interesting field, and it's probably the one that's getting the most media coverage in terms of the information, the volume of information that is circulating within society. It's argued that of young people under the age of 30 who have access to the internet, 99% have downloaded illegal content. Of those, about half have created new content out of that material. So videos like that, fan videos, I mean, if you want to waste some time this afternoon, I suggest you look up Bronies, which is My Little Pony mashed up with movie trailers. So My Little Inception is my favorite. So this has raised really interesting questions about how copyright should function. And for those of you who don't know, the underlying philosophical position of copyright is that copyright should balance the rights of a creator to benefit from their intellectual labor with the rights of a culture to benefit from their work. So it's a swings and balance. Somebody does some effort, they want to get reward, but of course they are giving a material to culture that helps culture progress and grow. And an argument has been made that copyright has moved too far away from those positions, particularly in an era where more and more information is being digitized. And digitization is really, really important to these debates because large amounts of different types of information are being digitized. What does that mean? It means different types of information are now compatible. Historically, if I wanted to make 99 Problems with Jay-Z, I'd have to record on tape somehow all those different Barack Obama clips, physically cut them up, then lay them over another bit of tape which has the audio track on, and then reprint that as a new tape. And that was just media content. What do I want to do if I want to visualize mathematical data, for instance, and turn it into an animation, which is something that's being done quite a lot. Digitization allows for different types of data to talk to each other, and it allows for new ways of expressing information and ideas. And copyright hasn't caught up to that yet. It hasn't caught up to issues of sampling, of remix, of permitted sharing. And so we're starting to think about what does this mean for the future of the information economy? And we don't have any great answers for this. Do we need to rethink copyright? Do we need to make allowances? Creative Commons has tried to create a set of licenses that work within the copyright framework that give permission to artists to reuse material. But the argument that Lessig and others make is that copyright stifles learning by doing. And learning by doing is something that we're seeing a lot of these so-called digital natives doing when they feel motivated. Back to that idea again. People learn to use these materials when they feel that it satisfies a need of theirs. And so what does that mean if they can't use the material that surrounds them, the information that surrounds them, the data that surrounds them in their culture to experiment with who they are, what they believe, what they think? So I'm just going to leave that up as a question here. Is corporate approaches to copyright dying? Corporate approaches to copyright are things like the Mickey Mouse Copyright Act, where copyright is 70 years plus the death of the author, for example. But we can start to think about copyright in terms of pastiche, bricolage, and remix, and how that might look in the 21st century as more and more information is digitized, and more tools of access and manipulation are made available to people in a way that makes sense to them. They're no longer specialized tools. What do I mean by that? That's probably a good idea to explain. Specialized tools require understanding of how they operate. If you talk to somebody who was on the internet 20 years ago, chances are they knew how to code HTML, at least. Just to make the web go, you needed to be able to code. 20 years before that, you needed to be able to code computer machine language, because that was the only way to make them go. Whereas if you talk to a student or a young person today and say, do you understand how Facebook works? Answers are you're probably going to get those blank faces right now. Do you understand how cookies work online? You're probably going to get blank faces. The tools of use become invisible. It becomes an invisible technology. A good example of an invisible technology is the light switch. Do you think about switching on lights? You only think about it if it goes wrong. If you hit the light and nothing happens is when you think about technology. And we're starting to see social media technologies in particular become invisible. We only think about them when something goes wrong. Our private data becomes public. Somebody can suddenly access our tweets and mentions them in an audience assembly. We only think about social media when it goes wrong. And so we're now starting to see that level of invisibility come not only to social media sites, but also to the tools that we use to manipulate the content on these sites. Things like Photoshop, GIMP, Movie Maker, all these different creativity tools are also becoming invisible and becoming a part of the everyday suite of opportunities that we have. Which leads to issue 2, privacy. Depends on the audience if I get laughter about this or not. Who thinks that we still have a right to privacy? See, I actually asked my 18-year-olds this question on Monday, and about half the room put their hands up. And I said, why? And they said, well, it's gone anyway, isn't it? This is a really interesting thing. When you talk about Facebook and privacy to young people, they understand, they know, but they don't really understand on an implicit level what it means. And if you remember back at the beginning at myth number 2, I showed you that lovely pie graph that somebody else did, that had 60% saying that, self-reporting and saying, my Facebook profile is private. It might be private to other users, but it is not private to Facebook. Facebook can see your data, and they can sell your data. And so, as the saying goes, if you can't see the thing that they're making the profit on, you are the thing being sold. If you've got teenage children, tell them this and see if they care. Because the fact that people are profiting on their data means that they have access to the tools that allows them to participate with their network, they think that is a fair trade-off. And I'm seeing a few shocked faces, which is great. So the question of do we have a right to privacy is something that hasn't been foregrounded, and it's not been foregrounded deliberately because corporations don't want users to know exactly how much profit and how much information they're gleaning out of the profiles that we give them. We give them so much information that as a single user, it feels like you're not giving them all that much. They know my favorite movies, they know my favorite music, they might know where I went to school, and they know the names of all my friends. Does that sound like a pretty safe set of data to give a company? Yeah, this is a very special audience. Normally people don't care. But data mining into these large data sets, when you've got 1.6 billion users, I mean, Facebook at its peak was like the 4th largest country in the world by population. If you've got that larger data set, even the most innocuous pieces of information become vitally important in terms of developing a profile about individuals, networks, and groups. This week, you guys picked a really great week to do this. Tumblr was bought by Yahoo for $1.1 billion. Not a bad chunk of change for a company that was losing money. What did they buy? Tumblr, as I mentioned, is where all the Facebook people are going. They're abandoning ship. And we tend to find a critical mass in social media site abandonment. Generally, a few opinion leaders go, and then the mass goes all at once. And that is because what makes a social media site useful is not the media, it's the social. If your friends are there, it's worth you sticking it out with the drama. But if all your friends are going, hey, I'm actually on Tumblr and it's cool, they don't make you use a name and I can post this great art and it's really interesting and fun, everybody will go at once. So what Tumblr has bought, as far as we can tell, is a cool factor. Because that's where the youth are, and that's where the youth are posting what they think is cool. And Yahoo is anything but cool. So they need it desperately, and they thought it was worth $1.1 billion when the company was valued at about $700 million. So we're seeing these sites being bought out by larger corporations to not only create perception management, but also to capture particular demographics. And this allows us to create global marketplaces where we can data mine very distinct populations to develop an understanding of what they want and how we can sell it to them. It's all about the dollar signs. So digital information doesn't just include video clips and music and downloads. It also includes what people like, how they feel about something, how they're responding to it. We saw the Barack Obama clip. That's a very overt way of responding to an issue. Most people just go on Facebook and go, I didn't like that. And download. That's usually how people respond to events on social media. They don't usually go to the extent of creating an entire cool music video. But if you get enough of a sense about who is downvoting and who is upvoting, you start to create a really detailed and nuanced picture about what is of worth and of interest and to whom. And there was some great research done beginning of the year where just from the preferences of movies and music, they could figure out things like sexual orientation and political affiliation. So even very disparate information data sets start to tell us really interesting things. The third issue is going to be identity. Facebook was a blip on the radar, but because Facebook was so big, it shaped a lot of the public perception about how social media worked. Facebook forced us to do a lot of things. It forced us to be geolocal, it forced us to have a legal identity, and by the way, there is no such thing as a real identity. If you hear people going real life versus virtual life, it's embodied versus disembodied. The virtual is just as real as the so-called real. Please, please, please get used to that. So this forcing people to have a legal identity, the name that was on their birth certificate, as their only online identity, happened with Facebook, but Facebook was an aberration. And we're now with Tumblr and Twitter moving back to plural, multiple, sometimes disconnected identities. And we're seeing people performing different identities through different social media based on their perceived expectation of who is watching. The child that comes home to dinner is different to the child in the classroom, is different to the child on Facebook, as that headmistress discovered. We are seeing people split their identity based upon who they're performing to and what they want to get out to it. So we're starting to see this idea of anonymity, should not say that word drunk, and pseudonymity. And so the idea that people are creating multiple senses of self online and giving them names and performing them. And we're starting to see continuity and discontinuity. Some people have a very clear continuity between their physical embodied performance of self and their Tumblr, Twitter, Facebook performance of self. Others keep them very separate and have panic attacks if they think there's been a breach. And so you have people very strictly controlling who has access to what kind of connection of their information. And it's interesting when you talk to these people, they say, nobody will be able to figure out it's me. I'm okay. Nothing is connected back to me. This is what I call the safety in numbers myth. And again, we know if we get a big enough aggregate of data, we can mine down to individual identity. And even on a practical day-to-day level, we can even figure out things through language use and through timing of reposting or posting of material. We can actually figure out to a very tight degree who that person is. Gender, for example, in laboratory experiments, we can prove about 80% of the time just based on language use in conversation. Girls talk different to guys. So if you're going to be a guy and you're going to look online as a girl, you might want to practice talking. So we're starting to see this process of reclaiming, and this is why I think privacy isn't dead yet. Privacy is being renegotiated. What is meant to be private information is being rejudged, but we're seeing people reclaim what they want to disclose and actually leaving sites if the disclosure exceeds what they're comfortable with. Now, people of a previous generation might not be comfortable disclosing their cell phone numbers, but people of this generation might be, but that's because the cell phone now has different associations. But other types of information, other types of data, photographs, self-reports, those are considered to be more private, and reposting those without permission is seen to be a social sanction. So we're seeing how sociability is being performed changing, but there are still the same concerns about privacy, disclosure, and identity. So this brings us on to networks. A lot of this we've kind of talked about already, but we're now starting to see the network becoming the important social center of the individual's life. People get more news from their social media than they do from official news sites, and that includes the journalists. Journalists often get the information that they report on from their social media sites first. That's cool. However, we're also seeing people in this great big information sea selectively choosing the data and the information that they consume to reinforce their worldview. That's not so cool. So what we're now starting to see, and what has sometimes been called as the wisdom of the crowds, though that's a myth for another lecture, is that people are consuming information, new ideas, new concepts from their social network. But their social network is made up of people like them, people with the same information. So sometimes you have garbage in, garbage out. Sometimes you have really cool information coming in and out. I guess it depends on how good your social network is. So, choose your friends wisely. So that leads us with a question. What now? What is the future going to look like? For a lot of today, I've been talking about the internet as something to go to. It's Facebook, it's Tumblr, it's sites on a screen on your desk. Very, very soon, the internet is going to be something you carry around in your pocket. It's on your cell phone. It might be in your glasses. Contact lenses with heads-up displays are already in production. The idea of the self is going to become more important because your cell phone includes a GPS sensor. And it will automatically ping not only your physical location, but who is physically near you. And it might say, hey, look, Andrew's around the corner, go say hi. There's a coffee shop around the corner that you both like that has a voucher on. Here's the voucher. So we might actually see the machines becoming part of the social conversation of information. We're going to see augmented reality become more important. You guys know what augmented reality is? A few of you? If you've got a cell phone with a camera, you hold it up and you take it across a location and virtual information is overlaid on the display. So if I had an augmented reality for this room, I might pop it up and it might pop up your names and your departments over each person's head. Then with a nice little green dot like in Sims. Found all the Sims players. We're going to see the internet become more and more invisible. We're also going to see it become more inclusive of data and information, not only just hard facts and figures, but also soft information about perception, preferences, and priorities. And all that information is going to get mixed together in new ways. And so we're going to have to think about issues like privacy, like copyright, like what the self is, what education is, how do we understand our social and informational environments. And so far there's no easy answers for that, but hopefully you guys might be involved in that. And I think I'll leave it there for questions.